My parents were like, "What are you doing? You're being a buffoon." It's like, you have a good job, like stick with it. But like I knew in my head, like it was never gonna be able to work. Like I was like, this is not. I just can't be here in a few years. Like, there weren't unfortunately any influences, and if anything, the people around me were telling me to do the opposite of what I wanted to do, which made it even harder. But I think I always just had a lot of confidence in myself that regardless of what occurred, I would figure it out some way.
Today, I'm here with David Pourquery, who is the founder and CEO of Groas. He left the world of private equity to build a fully bootstrapped AI company designed to challenge the traditional agency model. Thanks so much for being here today with us, David.
Thank you, Jana. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'd love to hear what, like where you were at when you were trying to decide, should I leave private equity to start my own company?
Yeah, a good question. Short answer is hating life in private equity. Hating my life. Now, look, I was 25, so I'm 26 now, but 25 when I decided to jump off. I'd gotten into private equity quite young, actually, relative to probably others. I broke in when I was, I think, 21, 22. So I spent a good few years. And look, to be honest, when I initially made that jump into private equity shortly after graduating university, I did think I would be there, right, for a good amount of time, right? Because comp gets better as you progress. Everything gets better, right?
Well,
Work
and it's really a dream job, isn't it? For a lot of people who pursue that investment side, they go work for an investment bank with hopes of getting hired in private equity.
correct. Yeah, that's exactly right. It is normally. But I actually did bypass the investment bank side. So like, man, and I got in even earlier, right? So like all good stuff, great. And again, my plan initially was to stay there, right, and build a career around that. And then I think probably I was at two different funds, one smaller one here in the UK, and then one based in both the US and the UK, much bigger, 80 billion under management. I think it was a year in at this new fund that I realized that I'd want to leave sooner than later. In what respect, to do what exactly wasn't super clear, but I knew basically 1 year in, like I can't see myself here in whatever,
And
3 years, 5 years.
why was that?
It's tough. There's a lot of reasons. I think one thing that might resonate with a lot of people listening is when you look at your peers, even your bosses, whatever, you think to yourself, is that really me? Like, do I align with how these people are? Like, can I actually see that happening? And for me, it was a resounding no. It was definitely a resounding no. I felt like there was no conceivable way I could still be here in like through as bad as that sounds, or I don't know, like, everyone's different. But I just thought, given my pretty much my personality traits, that I would wanna get out and do something more for myself.
So at that time, it wasn't a matter of thinking of, oh, maybe I could go work for another fund or pivot into some other side of
Yeah.
investing. It was really, I want to be working for myself.
Yeah, but also like the way you do that is also different, right? Typically, when people will start a company, they want to go raise money. But then if you do that, you are once again working for investors. Like whether you like it or not, I don't care. Like you now have people to respond to. So I knew that if I was to leave, it would have to be really on my own terms, like with a company I own 100% of, with time freedom, with location freedom. And that's even more challenging, right? Because actually, arguably today, raising money, if you have a decently credentialed background, it's quite easy. Like we get approached by VCs all of the time. But the hard of it was figuring out how to make this profitable from day one. And that's what took a little bit longer to figure out.
And when you had this inkling of maybe working for yourself, did you have other influencers in your life? Had you seen it done? I mean, how did you even come across that idea? Because for a lot of people, working for themselves is not the first thing that comes to their mind.
Yeah. That's a good point. Look, the answer is there was really no one, unfortunately, like in my immediate family who had really done entrepreneurship at all. And actually, I remember when I was like just starting to mess around with like other stuff on the side when I was in private equity, I was doing stuff with e-com, etc., etc. My parents were like, "What are you doing? You're being a buffoon. It's like, you have a good job, like stick with it." But like I knew in my head, like it was never going to be able to work. Like I was like, this is not. I just can't be here in a few years. Like, so short answer, there weren't unfortunately any influences, and if anything, the people around me were telling me to do the opposite of what I wanted to do, which made it even harder. But I think I always just had a lot of confidence in myself that regardless of what occurred, I would figure it out some way.
Yeah, all the well-meaning people who think they know better than you do for what's good for your life.
Correct.
I know my mom was very concerned for me about going out on my own. Like, why would you take that type of risk?
Correct. Well, actually, the biggest risk is staying. That's my opinion. If you actually look at the objective, the bigger risk is is not doing anything. So like for me, it was easy. It's just I need to figure out how to action that properly. Like what vehicle can I use to even get out of this? Like context, right? I'm like, okay, so I'm working private equity, working really hard. It's a very demanding job, of course, especially as a junior. How do I even have time to figure out like how to build a real business outside of this? So I actually started off doing e-commerce, okay? Because e-com doesn't require like necessarily day-to-day management. I could set stuff up in the evenings and weekends and have no life. Um, and then like get sales in the day. So like I was running up dropshipping stores to like 5-figure days, all good, all good. The problem is the margins in e-com, especially in dropshipping in 2025, 2026, which is not good enough. They're not good enough to leave a full-time role in private equity, obviously not. So then that's kind of when slowly I was spending a lot of money on Google Ads, getting to know all this sort of stuff. That's when like the early inklings of Groas started to form, and basically Groas ended up being the vehicle I could leave private equity with. But yeah, that's a bit of background. It's like I didn't just land on Groas from day one. There was a lot of testing for like a year at least.
Iterating. Yeah, let's talk about that. So you did drop shipping, and how did you come across that? Because I know that was
Yeah.
back in the day, that was a big thing for Gary V and,
Yeah.
talking about that. Like let's start how you even thought, yeah, let's go test the market a little bit and see what else I might be able to do.
Oh, yeah, drop shipping has gotten harder and it's brutal. Like I don't, I do have friends who do make a living off it, but you need to be doing very, very big volumes because otherwise the margins are just too tough. But dropshipping gives you really good, I think, base in online business, in my opinion, because it touches on so many different things, right? Marketing, building a landing page, crafting a brand, running ads, like financial, like cooking up some financials. Like it touches on so many different things that are involved in whatever like online business model you want to do after. So I thought like this would be a good base anyway. And on top of the fact that I was just super time constrained, right, at the time. So like I couldn't just set up a software company with customers I had to speak to during the day because I was in meetings in an office like all day. So yeah, e-commerce was basically that vehicle for me. And it was really cool, right? Like I'd be in meetings and I just see like crazy Shopify notifications. I felt like Jeff Bezos at the time. But yeah, like that was I spent a year like learning the ropes and doing good things in e-com basically.
And that's where you stumbled upon Google Ads. And what were your observations in that space then?
Yeah, good question. So look, I was investing and spending a lot of money on all the different ad platforms. TikTok, Twitter even a little bit, but Google Ads. Google Ads was like probably my number one activity. It's really complicated, right? It's really complicated. It has a lot of things wrong with it, I think, to be honest, compared to the other platforms. There's a lot more going on and a lot more areas you can go wrong. So I'd been programming since I was 13, 14, self-taught programming since I was quite young, studied computer science at university. So I started to think about, is there anything we could build on top of Google Ads to make it better, to like basically give you a better campaign performance? So Groas started off basically as a very simple, like a SaaS recommendations tool, very low entry ticket sort of pricing. Again, the first feature I ever wanted to build for Groas was dynamic landing pages. Basically, adapt when someone clicks on your ad, what they see on the page is adapted to what they were searching for. So you can have one. Gross will constantly change that. So if someone was searching for an arm hair trimmer, we show them an arm hair trim page. If they were searching for leg hair trimmer, leg hair trim page. Like that was like V1 of Gross, that basic feature. It obviously evolved into a lot more than that. But yeah, look, it came from basically my own needs, like figuring out like there's a lot here that's wrong. Could we build something that's a little better?
And during this time, was the company self-funding, or were you having to take your paycheck and fund it as well?
Good question. So for the first month or so, it was fully self-funded from my own pocket, but then we became profitable really quickly from day one. And the reason is, so like obviously now, by the way, I leave private equity, just FYI, just for context, with not a business. Like Grass was not a bit, Grass was like nothing. It was like barely an MVP. We had a few paying customers. It was like super basic stuff. But then when I left, I'm like, okay, my back is against the wall. This has to work. Which meant I became super obsessive with the customer. I had people paying us like $99 a month with my WhatsApp, phoning me at 2 a.m. and I'd pick up to help them out. And when you do that, people stick with you because you're doing a good job for them. So short answer is like early on we found profitability limited, but everything back then was going right back into building the product, building the product, building the product.
So let's talk about, I guess, taking a step back then before you stepped away from private equity, or like what was at stake? Like when you were saying, okay, I feel like I should be working on my own. I
Yeah.
have this idea, but I'm here at a job. So what was at stake for you?
I think if you leave, it's hard to come back. And it depends how you leave. But I mean, if you leave, especially probably under the circumstances I did, which was a bit out of the blue, you're not going to get a job back. It's unlikely. It's unlikely
Mm.
because it's normally not taken well. If you leave, it's normally to go to a competitor. But if you leave and just exit the industry to then come back, very unlikely that happens. So I guess that really was the main thing at the time. Is that like what will I do if Groas doesn't work out? And I didn't have an answer. There was no answer. There was no backup.
And so were you confident that you were going to be able to replace your salary that quickly? Like, I mean, so private equity tends to have pretty
Yes,
decent salaries and high bonus structures. So, like, how much are we walking away from in a year?
a lot, a lot. Especially for a 25-year-old kid. But again, I figured like it's just no. It wasn't even about the money though. So that it, also another thing is like at the time, obviously now it's great. I'm doing far, far, far better in like less than a year, like than I would have ever done in private equity. So that's great, good stuff. But I also don't care about that at the same time. That was never my incentive. My incentive was I want to be in control of my own time, build something I care about, build a work with people I enjoy, that sort of thing. It was much more that, and like I could do that from a shack in the Philippines living on $10 a day. I like that's feasible, and I would have no problem living like that. And I did for a little bit actually at the very, very start. So I mean, yeah, looking back, it wasn't really a risk at all.
And when you were, moving towards this decision, what was there anything that started making it feel more urgent?
Yeah, because we start even though it was like this very basic V1 of a product, it was like super trash compared to what we're at now. There were people with very significant amounts of Google ad spend, like putting their stuff through us. I was like, whoa, okay, like we're not making much money now, but like this is a signal. Like these are people who really know what they're doing and they're trusting us already with like this very basic V1 of a thing. And I was like, yeah, if I don't give this my full attention now, then it might not ever work. So I just had to make the call to just leave and rip the band-aid off and go all out.
So, do you feel like you spent much time analyzing? Should I change? Should I go? Stay with private equity? Should I change funds, or should I go out on my own? Like, did you really
Yeah,
like go? Oh, what's my cost benefit analysis and what's my, any of that?
short answer is unfortunately not. I knew I had to go. It was a question of when. So it was more like a timing thing. Like when can I actually make this jump? And when we started to have a tiny bit of traction, I was like, this is enough. And even if it goes to zero, I would like figure something else out somehow. Like without a job with very limited funds, I would have to figure something else out. I mean, there are a lot of good like decision making frameworks out there that exist. I've heard of a few. I've sometimes played around with a few in the past, writing stuff down. Like I think Reid Hoffman has a really good one. I've personally found that the best decisions generally come from the gut. And so if you know yourself well, if you have good intuition generally, I think you should follow that.
Well, that kind of leads into my next questions because part of your gut is based on your history and your competence and what you know.
Yes.
And for maybe people who aren't maybe fully familiar with private equity, there's a couple angles to private equity. There's the analyzing what company should we buy? Does it make sense to invest in a company? Does they have the right metrics? And then there's the operations of the company once it's purchased to get it up to the point where it's worth selling, and then that's where you make your big money in private equity. So you've probably looked at tons of companies.
Yep.
Did you feel like that helped you at all with your idea and where you thought
Yeah.
the opportunity lied?
Question. Yeah. Look, for context as well, before working private equity, I also worked in venture capital. Like
Mm.
I know both worlds, and they're very, very different worlds. Also, working in VC also made me like never want to raise a VC, by the way, because I saw what went on. They're very different worlds. So yeah, look, you can analyze grass from two perspectives. Like, did I believe in VC? Like, the number one thing you look at, the only thing you can really look at, is the founding team. Do you trust them?
Mhm.
Did I trust in myself? Yes, probably too arrogantly at the start, but I just did. Then like P side is obviously founding team does matter, but then you're like much more complicated problem. There's so much more going on. These are established businesses that you're buying. A lot more operational complexity. You're taking on the day-to-day management, unlike in VC where you take a small stake. So analyzing things in P is very different to how you would in VC. However, like what working in P did though for me, to be super frank, you meet with all these entrepreneurs who've built these massive businesses and they're looking to sell whatever. And I've met with plenty working at it. And like I just remember thinking at the time, like, this might sound very arrogant, like I don't think this person is more special than me. I don't think they have something. I just don't believe that they do. I think you know what I mean. So that kind of gave me like a deep, like real confidence, inner confidence that regardless of what might occur, I would figure out a way because I've met people, who are worth 9 figures, 10 figures, whatever it is, and and just personally got the instinct that they weren't above. That was just my opinion.
Can you pinpoint when you made I mean, it sounds like it was a two-step decision. It was one, I don't want to work in private equity and I want to start my own company, and then a sub-decision of when to finally leave. Can you pinpoint those two decisions to like
Yeah.
one moment?
yes, both actually have their respective moments, and I have to be careful what I say here. For the first one, when did I know I had to leave? It was a year in. Something had occurred. I'll try obfuscate the details, but
Mm.
I'd actually gone out, taken a lot of initiative to do something, right? And something that would like massively help just the fund, we'll say generally, and spend a lot of time on it, a lot of initiative, etc., etc. And which logically is just very logical. It's competitors were doing it, we weren't doing it, so I went out and did a bunch of work, and then it got received so poorly, and I actually ended up having people angry at me for doing something that would
Mm.
help them. And I was like, in that moment, obviously it's a big fund, etc. But in that moment, I thought, I don't know if like I am suited for something like this because I'm naturally someone who's going to take initiative, going to want to take risk, going to want to take action. And when you have like five different layers of bureaucracy, I mentally will start to struggle. Like, this just doesn't make sense. It's all too much politics, too much nonsense. I don't have the brain for this. I have brain for other things, but not for this. I suck at that. That was like, okay. So I knew that at that moment. Okay, that's one thing. And then when exactly to jump ship? Yeah, it's like I said, when we started to get traction with serious spenders, not like, excuse my language, like buffoons who didn't know much, but like people who did Google Ads as a career, made their money off it, and who were like, whoa, okay, you guys are onto something special here. That's what we think. And when I heard that, I'm like, maybe we are. Until like at that point, it was just an easy jump.
And how did you find, I mean, how did that happen? How did you find out that you were onto something by these other people? Like, were you in communities? Were you meeting them? Like, how were you hearing this feedback?
I would, like I said, WhatsApp. I'd have everybody on my WhatsApp 24/7. Like being
Mm.
super responsive, being super helpful. You build a relationship with these people. Um, Obviously now we're much bigger scale. I'm personally not involved in like the day to day, but like at the time, yeah, having those direct relationships was super helpful.
But I mean, feedback from it sounded like maybe competitors or other people who had done something similar. How are you getting that type of feedback?
Oh, no, sorry, no, this is feedback from customers, like
Oh,
very
okay.
early, who are big spenders who know what they're doing. They're like, okay, wow, I
Oh,
think
okay.
this is you guys are onto something. And I was like, maybe we are. I didn't really believe it at the time, but them saying it and I respected them a lot, gave me extra confidence.
And where were you at, I guess, from a revenue point when you were deciding, or like kind of what metrics were you using that it's like,
Yeah,
oh, it's safe enough to jump in and put my all in it?
yeah. So our revenue was very small at this time because we hadn't figured out a good pricing model. So we were charging way too
Mm,
little for what we were doing.
I'm sure.
So revenue wise, it was nowhere near comparable to what I was making private equity. Not even on top of that, I had expenses of continuing trying to build it. But it was more just attraction of seeing like big amounts of spend coming to us and the compliments
Mhm.
and this and that. And I'm like, okay, we will figure it out one way or another because these people trust us.
So, it sounded like there were a few things at play. You understood who you were, and so realized that you needed to be in an environment maybe where you had more control around outcomes, right? And
Yes,
control over your destiny. It sounded like you had a lot of, you did a lot of testing and got a lot of good signals about, hey, I'm on the right track. But what would
correct.
you say if you had to boil this down to, well, this is why I made the decision to leave high paying private equity to go into a startup? Like, what was like the founder's principle?
Yeah, look, I think control of how I live and run my life, to be super frank, right? When you're in private equity, like you have to, well, any other, like a lot of jobs, you have to ask, can I take a holiday? Can I do this? Obviously, my motivation is not more holidays, but it was more just control over my own time and my own destiny. And also, like, that's one side. And the other side is thinking, I think there's like, we can do something really cool here. Right? Forget like the financial upside, which to be honest, never really interested me. I just think there's an opportunity here to build something really cool. So like that as well was very, very strong.
And like, do you feel like this idea of I can control my own destiny is something that is a repeatable type of principle, or was it a moment in time? Because that to
Yeah.
me almost feels a little bit of a desire than a principle. It's like
Mm,
that's the outcome I want, but that's not necessarily what maybe you used to make that decision. It's like, I want this outcome. How can I get there? What drove the I'm confident in how I can get there?
I don't know. I think I'd always been entrepreneurial a little bit since I was young.
Mm.
Had done a lot of different things, right? Like my first business was at 19, selling ethical hacking, cybersecurity courses when I was in university, which is quite funny. And it was me showing up and teaching like teenagers who were like 1 year younger than me, all this stuff. It's like that inkling was just always there. But to be
Mm.
honest, I had always thought like if I were to do that like for real, like not just some fun little side business, it would be later in my life, right? maybe in 30s, and who knows in what format that would take place. But yeah, I didn't expect it to probably occur so soon. But that inkling had always been there since young. Why? I'm not too sure. There is no one really in my immediate family who's done anything entrepreneurial. If anything, they dissuaded against it from always.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm not too sure why that's there.
When you, when you created the ethical hacking
Yeah.
business, was it is it again an idea of like seeing a need and seeing a space and moving into that space? Like, how did that arise?
Yeah, so at the time there was nothing like it. So at the time
Mm.
there were these cybersecurity so this is in London by the way for context, where I lived and grew up. There were like these coding courses existed, cybersecurity courses existed where they teach you like these principles of encryption and all this BS. But there was
Mm.
nowhere actually showing you if you wanted to break into your neighbor's Wi-Fi, how could you actually do that?
Right.
So that's actually what I was teaching. Obviously, you have to do it ethically, etc., etc. But there was genuinely nothing on the market at the time as to how to do something like that. So that there was a big need. I felt like I had taught myself so much. Why not impart that knowledge onto others? And also, the summer before that, I had spent my whole summer doing door-to-door sales on a commission-only basis, and that I think was a big eye-opener in terms of like what's possible, and like seeing the hustle that people had probably gave me some as well.
It's interesting. The door to door sales, I like so many people I've spoken to talk about how, not
Oh,
this podcast, just in general, but
yeah,
about how pivotal that was, an
yes,
experience that was into their success because it's so painful, but you learned so much.
100%, 100%. Yeah,
I'm wondering, because the reason I was asking about that story was to see if that you might have this trend, and what the trend sounds to be is maybe seeing asymmetric opportunity early. Like, I mean, as in both times, it feels like you moved into a space where
yeah,
there was not a lot of people in that space, so you saw the opportunity and you filled it.
correct. Correct. Yeah, rather than trying to piggyback or copy or whatever, it's always been a case of this is not being done, but I personally think I have an edge for one reason or another. Therefore, let me try to do
Mm.
it.
And when you were moving through this, and like, let's say it's like, I'm going to quit my job, or hey, everybody, I just quit my job. Do you think anybody would have said you had a blind spot, or
Oh,
what was the
of course.
feedback you were hearing?
You're kidding me. Every close friends, family, obviously my old job. I actually didn't go into detail like while I was leaving, but I heard like even now that they're still talking about it. So look, yeah, yeah, definitely. But I think I don't know why. I just always had a very, very strong belief in myself that one way or another I would figure it out. And that's the only thing that's kept me going, to be honest.
Mm.
Stupid self-belief comes from somewhere.
And so, did that feedback and what you were hearing at the time, like, did you have any doubt for a moment? Like, even just a moment, it was like, oh shit, did I make a bad decision or no? It's like, whatever, you guys are all fools.
Honestly, occasionally there may have been some of that, only in the early stages. Obviously now, like we're very far beyond that, very, very far beyond that. But maybe in the early stages a little bit. But even then, I thought, okay, like what's my alternative? I physically couldn't go back to doing like a normal job. Like physically, after you've tasted a little bit of like making money online, it's then or like actually making your own first dollars, whatever. Like seriously, it's very hard to then go back and have somebody else tell you what to do all day.
Hmm.
Very, very hard. So I think I was like, I don't know what alternative I have. I genuinely don't know what I would do. Uh,
Yeah. Oh, I get it. I always say I feel like I'm unemployable. Like, if I absolutely have to get a job, I will. But man,
yeah,
it would take a lot to get there.
correct, correct.
So talk to us a little bit about them. So you made this decision, I see this opportunity that people aren't seeing. I've kind of tested it. I'm going to go all in. Kind of outline for us the next 6 or 12 months. Like, what was the outcome? What
Yeah,
happened?
it was chaos. It was chaos, right? So look, I leave London firstly, right? So I haven't been back to London in a year. Probably went back for maybe a week max, like in between. But I leave London and I get a one-way ticket to Southeast Asia. Actually, no, I did stop in other places. Why Southeast Asia? Because it's very affordable. And when I was starting out
Mm.
with very limited funds, I was like, okay, I need a place to sleep. I need to eat. Doing this bootstrapped. So yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time in actually Vietnam, incredible country. Spent a lot of time there, and it was 18-hour days, 7 days a week. 18-hour days, 7 days a week. Obviously now we're still working hard. I'm still working hard, but my work has changed a lot, right? Obviously now we're building a team, whatever, whatever. But that's what it took to get this off the ground with no outside funding. Because like one thing, okay, you can build the best thing on earth. How do you attract people to even like? How are you doing this? How are you getting people to even sign up and give you their money and trust you with their Google Ads campaigns, which is sensitive because they're spending real money on something like that's a whole other ball game. And then also next thing, how do you keep them? You can't like you need to keep these people, right? So yeah, doing all of that equation basically was 18-hour days, 7 days a week. It's a lot of it's a blur. I have to be super honest with you. It's literally a blur. I would just wake up, check my phone, see what's occurred the night before, and I have like 50 notifications, 50, like 50 fires to put out, and I'm like, oh my God. And rinse and repeat, like
Mm.
for many months on end. Obviously now it's different, it's very different, but yeah, that's what it looked like. It's a lot of it's just a big blur.
You have hit on something though that I've actually not heard in any of our interviews. You went to a completely other country so that you could
Yeah, yeah.
make this happen. How did you land on, sorry, you said Philippines, right? Or was it
No, no, no. Southeast Asia, I did travel a little bit, but Vietnam was probably the place I stayed the
Vietnam?
most.
Vietnam. So yeah,
Vietnam,
how did you even make that decision? Because you don't even have a support network. I assume if you'd stayed in
correct?
England, like worst case scenario, you could go live with your parents or something if you had to. Like, how
No,
did you decide? No.
no. Well, like I said, Vietnam is actually super affordable, but it's an
Right.
incredible country. Just in general, as a segue, it's really an incredible country, I think. But I was like, oh, also actually somebody I was working with. Yeah, sorry, I missed this out. One of the engineers I had was actually an English guy who had moved to Vietnam.
Hmm.
Around my age. So like that was always there. We'd spoken about it, whatever, whatever. And I'm like, well, rent in London is going to be minimum, I don't know, 2K, 3K a month, whatever it is. I need somewhere where I can stay for cheap and put all of the money back into building product, trying to build basically the best product, and that can be done. So yeah, there was that connection with somebody on the team who was already there speaking highly of it. So I was curious and I went and I ended up really, really enjoying it.
And I guess one advantage that, you've mentioned it briefly, but potentially one advantage is your age in the sense that
Yes,
you weren't taking kids with you. I
correct.
assume you weren't married at the time or have a long-term partner or something. So,
Correct. Fully like zero strings. Of course, I've got
mm.
my brother who's still in London, but obviously I arranged for him to come, etc., etc. But yeah, like obviously, if I was married with kids, that's a very, very different equation, very different thinking, unfortunately. Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's important to when you are assessing risk, and we did have a guest talk about this, is your age does become a factor. And not to say that you
Yeah.
can't go out on your own and take risks. It's just the evaluation is a little different.
Big time. Yeah, fully agree.
Mm. And so where are you today with the company? Like what would you say?
Oh, right, yeah, cool. I was gonna say, where am I today? I'm in Miami currently. But look, we are growing really, really super quick, right? So the transition was we start off as this little tool, great, got lots of users, use that to train on custom models, and then since January we basically deployed full autonomy on Google Ads campaigns. So we were the first in the world to have genuine fully end autonomous campaigns. And since then, it's just been this, not like this at the start. It was like, okay, growing month to month. It's great, steady. Since January, it's been like we have been unable to keep up with demand. So like now we're in hiring mode. Team of 12 will probably be 20, probably by June or July. But I also try to keep things super lean, just in general. But yeah, short answer is since launching full autonomy, it's kind of been yeah, hard to keep up with.
What are the timeframes associated with that, just for reference for our listeners? How long until you did the full autonomous thing, and how long has it been since then? Or,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, like I said, so first SaaS that we released to the world, like recommendations, was in July of last year. Okay,
Mm.
July 2025. We spend basically 6, 7 months from that point building towards full autonomy. So like away from a SaaS to now we are displacing entire teams and people are running everything for us. Um, and we released that the 1st of January 2026. And that was, I guess, our little bit of a big moment because since then it's just been month on month, even as we've increased, doubled, tripled prices since then, demand continuing, the number of signups basically doubling each month, etc., etc. Amount of spend is going a lot more than double. So yeah, we're now at a good point, basically building the team. I think we found that nice fit at this point.
And so, looking back, did anything not go as planned?
Oof. So much, so much. These days, a lot less isn't going as planned. I think we're a lot
Mm.
more solid. We have systems, like we really do know what we're doing. But I think, yeah, in the early days when we were figuring things out, definitely a lot didn't go as planned. Yeah, I could tell you a lot of stories, but I think probably the first 6, 7 months were the most chaotic on the product side, etc., etc. Now we're in a place where we know what we're doing.
Well, so like what wasn't going as planned? Was it more product? Was it more yeah, like if you had to bucket it, like what type of challenges were you running into and how are you approaching those challenges to address them?
Yeah, I think product, right? Like just because it's really, really hard. Like it's really hard to build what we've done, which is why like I would give our entire front end code to any competitor who wants it. Like you can build it. Like, that's not the hard bit. The hard bit is making sure that the decision making engine is very sound and beating what a human can do. That's a really, really, really tough technical problem to crack. And you can only do that if you have lots of different customers across lots of different niches, locations, etc. So figuring that bit out was by far the hardest, and actually that's where I spent the most of my time. Growth and getting organic growth was never an issue, because
Mm.
since the early days, LLMs have really liked Groas, so they always recommend us. So like we basically grew to 7 figures ARR, surely like all of it organic, and we did that in like 6 months. All of it is organic, obviously referrals, customers showing other customers, but all of it is organic, SEO, LLMs, whatever, whatever. Now we're in obviously a different growth phase, so now we're using other channels. But yeah, that's how it happened.
So if you look back across this whole time from private equity to where you are now,
Yeah.
would you have done anything differently?
At what point are we talking like now with Groas or like in my career or like what?
Well, yeah, it's like, would you have like skipped private equity before, or do you think that was good? And then if would you have timed
Good question.
your leave differently if you were still gonna, if you thought the private equity was still valuable, anything in that time frame, would you have done
Yeah.
different?
Well, you answered it for me. Yeah, short answer is I would have never gone into. I would have just immediately. So I graduated uni during COVID times. My
Mm.
plan when I was finishing uni was to go travel a little bit, travel a little bit, and then do something for myself. Not exactly clear. Um, Obviously, COVID happened, whole world shut down, couldn't travel, and I ended up basically getting offered a job. So some VC firm in London heard about what I was doing as part of my undergrad thesis. They heard about it. They gave me a job based off that. I was like, okay, look, no one else is hiring, and I just sort of fell into it a little bit, right? But possibly what I would change is going back, maybe stick a little bit more to my original plan, and not take that job, right? Wait out a little bit and try start something 21, right? Because if I would have started something at 21, like I would have been a completely different beast at 25 with all the learnings that I had. So yeah, I think maybe a bit more patient, wait things out, and do what I wanted to do initially. Because once I fell into private equity, obviously it gets harder and harder every year to leave for
Yeah.
various reasons. But I think I did it in terms of my timing of the leave. I think I did it basically pretty spot on. Pretty happy.
And so, how would you recommend if?
Mm.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this correctly, but can you teach people to see that asymmetric opportunity? Like, can you give any advice on how people can see opportunity that may not exist?
Yeah, it's really tough. I think it comes down to two things, in my opinion, at least for me. One is you need to know your gut, like know yourself very well. Trust your gut always, if possible. If you have a good general instincts, I think you'll know that. You should always follow that. I think your gut, whatever you want to call it, your subconscious, however you wanna phrase that, is able to process more information than your conscious mind can, and there's a lot more learnings accumulated over its life. I think, yeah, if you can trust your gut and you're very sure on something, you should do it. Because even if, by the way, even if you're wrong on this idea of yours, uh, having the ability to pivot, just be resilient enough to pivot, is the more important quality, right? So I think if you know that you're someone who's resilient, can like do things on the fly, I think that's how you should operate. And the other thing is like figure out what particular advantages you've accumulated. So for me, it was okay, in the cybersecurity thing, it was like no one else is doing this. I know a lot about cyber. Let me do this. And also, probably no one at the time had the audacity to like market something as a great like I'm going to teach your son how to break into his neighbor's life. No one was doing that. It was all like very correct, etc. So like I did that. I was 19, a bit more reckless, and it worked great. For Groas, my advantage was, I think, a couple things. One, I'm still deeply technical. I've been coding since I was 13, 14. That's good. So I know how to build a product successfully and also how to hire good engineers. That's another equation. Two, I also knew like a good amount of Google Ads. I spent a lot of money on it. Uh, and I also grasped it really quickly, et cetera, et cetera. So I think I like married those two things. And finally, I think a big advantage, possibly also disadvantage a little bit sometimes, was I was a humongous outsider to like the whole marketing space. I'd never worked at a marketing agency. I didn't really have any good friends who were in marketing, and so that gave me my own perspective on how things should be done. I didn't have any like bad biases of like all etc. So I think those three things married gave me the courage. So I had my own advantages, and I think that you should assess that when and doing your own thing.
You had a domain expertise without having industry expertise, it sounds
Correct.
like. So you could bring new insights
Yeah.
to the industry.
Correct.
And
Just to add on that, there's a lot of stuff they like a marketing agency would do, which I'm like, this doesn't make logical sense. But they all do this. This is insane, but they all do this. So like that's why like we've been able to differentiate ourselves. So I just operate it like from first principles, like what's logical to do.
hmm. And so if, what advice would you give somebody who was maybe at the same crossroads that you were at when you know?
Yeah. And it depends on your life circumstances. Like for me,
Mhm.
the bigger risk was actually not doing anything because at the time, again, I was single, no kids, like 25, that sort of age. So like it was very obvious actually I should just do it, even if it doesn't work out. Somebody else, I think you have to maybe a bit more conservative, right? If you're later in your career, probably the answer would have been for them, if they're in my exact same shoes, maybe try get to a certain point of revenue with your side business first, right? To the point where it's almost replacing what you currently have. At that point, okay, maybe you can jump. So I think the risk tolerance will change a lot depending on your life circumstances. But for me, I could basically go full risk on no investors, no nothing, very, very limited personal funds. I'd figure it out. But yeah, I think it just depends on the person.
Well, David, this has been a really fun conversation. I'd just like to ask, what's one thing you want to leave top of mind with our audience?
Trust your gut. I've said it a few
Mm.
times. I think it's a good saying. If you have a good gut, I think you should trust it.
And if somebody wants to find out more about what you do or follow you, where do they do that?
Sure. I mean, look, our website probably the best place to start. Groas Groas.ai. I'm on LinkedIn, but yeah, you can email me at dp@groas.ai. But yeah, most of the info you want is on the website.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out to be on our show today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
And to our audience, until next time, make the decision, act on it, be accountable, and stay unstoppable.